All right. Well, he looks to defend on May 31st, and we're so excited to get the chance to talk to him a little bit. It is the Fierce FC heavyweight champion, Jared Vanderaa. Jared, it's great to talk to you, man. How you been?
I'm exhausted. That's how I've been. It's just tired, exhausted, and tired. I'm trying to find that middle place where it's not so much exhausted, but not a little bit more than tired. I'm trying to find that middle ground to kind of like make it through the days. Camp's going well, and that's the big reason why I'm exhausted. But yeah, that's kind of how I've been. I'm going to need more coffee today. It's one of those days.
So, what about it is specifically? I know you run a gym as well as obviously you're in camp. You have a lot of things on your plate. What is specifically the things that have been making the day so jam packed?
Okay, so most of my mornings, I do about 3 to 4 hours in the morning of training, and then but my drive to Huntington Beach is roughly 2 to 3 hours in the morning, just one way. The perks of living in California. It's only like 70 miles away. But again, traffic, just trash. On the way home, it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So literally my mornings start out with, 8 hours, and then I get home around 1 or 2, rest up, and then I go to work from basically 3:30 to about 9:30 at night. In that time, I do get some more training in, or I'll do rolls, with my higher belts, or uh, just kind of do the cardio and stuff like that with them. And then on Tuesday nights, I usually have a different instructor. Tuesday and Friday nights where I get to do some more training. But while I'm doing all this, I'm also renovating my gym, and I'm trying to weightlift a lot more. And I hate weightlifting. It's dumb. I truly hate it. But my opponent, he look a little strong, so I want to be able to, depending on where this fight goes, I want to be able to offset some of that power imbalance with by actually trying to weight train a little bit more. But I truly do not find any joy out of it. So yeah, I think it's a combination of all that just kind of wearing me down. And yeah,
You bring up such a fascinating point. I want to go back to what you began with, which is that long commute. Is there any time that you haven't had to do that long commute? And when did that all kind of, when did you make that choice that that was going to be, the primary gym and school that you were going to be going to no matter where you were in terms of Southern California?
so any commute for the shortest commute I would be looking at if I got a gym a bit closer to my place would still be about an hour. Um, like so I own Team Quest. I'm affiliate with Dan Henderson's Athletic Center. They are they are 25 minutes away from me, but just kind of the layout of the city I am in to that city, it's 30 minutes minimum, but between mornings and school time, you're looking at easily over an hour. And if you're on one of those days where you hit all the red lights, sometimes you can hit easily an hour and a half. Uh so so when I was kind of looking at the perspective of like the gyms closer to me, I'm like, okay, there are perks, but then you run into there's not a lot of heavyweights in here, or this coach isn't like my cup of tea. And then so I started broadening out, and then I went to Kings, and I everyone there just really down to earth. And I was like, you know what? If I really want to improve. I found myself really enjoying them. My striking is improved, I think, in tenfold. My grappling, even more so. I think it was kind of one of the better decisions, and because I've seen results going there, it just makes it easier to keep that drive. And when I make the drive and seeing that there's so many other people that have to suffer the same fate as I do, it doesn't feel as bad.
One of the big things I wanted to ask you about was your mindset coming into February's fight against Kent Mafileo. That was obviously a big fight, a belt on the line, Fierce Fighting Championship. What were you looking forward to in that fight? And also, what was your mindset like going into that one specifically?
Um, it's going to be kind of the same going into this fight. This is going to sound rude, and it's not meant to be, but I'm trying to use these fights to get back into the UFC. They're just another stepping stone. And being in there, like I was able to hang. Now I just want to dominate these fights. I don't want to like I want to go in there and I want to make easy work of Eric. Um, Not because he's bad or anything. I just want to get back into the UFC and really get into the top 10, aim for the title. Like, and I get these messages, I get these questions like, oh, do you think you ever, yeah, we all do. Like, like every fighter that fights believes one day they will be champ or they dream of being champion. And that's no different. It's like, yeah, I had setbacks, but like in a sense, I can make excuse for every fight I had in the UFC. And honestly, a lot of the credit, like all of my excuses are legitly real excuses. I refuse to kind of rely on them. Like the one thing, okay, I'm a big TikTok person. Found out I got banned freaking by the government. Um, like I get all the questions like, "Oh, why did you take Chase Sherman down?" Da da da. Da. I'm like, dude, I was injured, but between my pride and just kind of thinking it was nerves, I didn't pull out. And I'm not one of those guys that are like, oh my God, I have maybe in boo boo, I'm pulling out. I'm like, let's go. And I don't want to sit there and take away anything from Jay Sherman. He went out there, did his thing, and I went out there knowing I was hurt. The only person that's at fault there is me. And I don't want to give people excuses. And so the mindset is just to kind of, if I want to get back in there to do all that, but with just that just that goal and that level of just dominance that I want to show at Fierce.
Yeah. How close would you say you are to getting back to the UFC? Obviously, you get the win over Kent, another win potentially over Eric Iman. How close would you say you are? Are you in talks with them in any way? Do they want you back in any sort of, have you had any of those conversations yet?
No. Okay, so I know my manager's close, but that's them. I've talked to a few people that were like, yo, if you do this, you'll be back on knocking on the door. You'll be the guy, like a short notice kind of guy. If especially like if a fight pops off in California, um, there would possibly be those options. So I don't quite know how close I am. I just know if I win dominantly with Eric, it's one step closer. And that's the only thing I'm going on based off is one step closer. At this point, though, kind of like it sounds so dumb to say. Uh, at this point, with my age and just kind of my record, I'm kind of also opening to go to like maybe one. Uh, I, okay, I also have a giant. I love the Asian cultures from like all of them, not just one particular one. I would love to fight in Japan, Thailand, Singapore. Like there's so much culture and richness that I don't think a lot of us Americans truly appreciate. And fighting with one would definitely be a way to kind of view that if, the UFC doesn't take me back.
Yeah.
PFL, I'm not against it, but I had to turn them down last year. Was it like 2 years ago or something like that? They asked me to take a very short notice fight. It was like on 3 days notice. And normally I would say yes, but I was in the process of cutting weight, cutting to 205, and I just came off of some stitches, like 3 or 4 stitches across my eyelid. And even though I was like, I think it was a sparring day that morning, and I did great, but I was like, I don't like, but you could see how red it was, where I was like, if I take one strong, run hard hit, it's splitting. And it was kind of on the eyelid, not the eyebrow. And so I was like, nah, I'm not going to risk a loss just because I might get cut open right at the eyelid first punch. And yeah, and I think that might have, put a sour taste in their mouth. But again, they didn't know that. They just maybe saw that I said no.
Yeah. Speaking a little bit about kind of your move and your rise into the beginning of your UFC career, obviously you fought Harry Hunsucker back in 2020. How did that all come to be? Obviously, I'm sure you have a manager, but how did that all kind of accumulate? And what was it like being able to fight on that big of a stage just a couple of years ago?
Okay, so manager did most of the work. I'm gonna put that out there. But Harry Hunsucker wasn't my original opponent. I was supposed to fight, I want to say his name, Oscar Akota. Um, so it was kind of a weird change in styles because I was prepping for a dude that was more of a traditional, like very movie, very great boxer. So I was planning on just fighting a pure boxer. And then, like on 3 day notice, they're like, "You got Harry Hunsucker," and they're like, "Oh, are you going to say no?" I'm like, "No, this is an opportunity. I'm not saying no to this." I'm like, I'm jumping on it like he's jumping on it. Like that would be foolish of me to just be like, "No, I don't want to fight him." I was like, "No, we're fighting him." We went out there. And he was a little bit more of a wild caveman type of thing. Like he was throwing some bombs, but once I was able to get him on the ground and uh, get him into that turtle position, I did my thing. And then from there, I took every fight that I could. I like at the end of the day, what pisses a lot of people off. I like to fight more so than I care about the money. And when people fight me, they think like I like fighting on all aspects of it. I know some people don't like that. Like I don't mind standing and banging, but I also don't mind going on the ground and rolling. Like lately, I've been doing a lot of jiu-jitsu competitions. I've been flirting with, high level like skilled grapplers. What was it? Like yesterday I went with one of the God, what are like the one championship twin brothers? I forget their names. Like Trey and
The Rotolos?
Rolando. Yes, thank you. I went with one of those brothers. And instead of just standing and banging with him, I was like, nah, fam, take down. Like all I did was just like I was shooting takedowns on this guy. And they were great rolls. And it was funny because you could see both of us holding back because I don't know if you know this, there might be a slight size difference. Um, like his first couple seconds was like, does this guy not know who I am? So like you could see that he was being smart about his jujitsu, and then I was able to do something where he was like, "Oh, he does know who I am. I could roll." And but it was just one of those. There was a level of respect for each other, and yeah, it was a fun role and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I've been just trying to do a lot more high level jiu-jitsu matches. Like 2 weeks ago, I won Subversive, which is combat jiu-jitsu. So I mean, like I said, I could stand, I could go on the ground and grapple. Uh, don't matter. I'm just one of those guys that like to fight. So that's
Yeah.
all Eric has to prepare for is a dude that's going to fight him.
You talk about being someone who just likes to fight. Where does that all stem from? When did you realize that this was something that you wanted to do?
I don't know. I okay, so I remember as a kid growing up with my sister's family, me and her cousin would just beat the shit out of each other as kids. Like we would play fight until we were bloodied, like trying to pass out. Um, what was it? He eventually, and then like my mom separated her dad, so we stopped hanging out. But like 10, 15 years later, like my sister was like, yeah, you and my cousin, you guys both are MMA fighters now. So it was like when I say we grew up to be fighters, it's like we fought when we were young kids, and I'm talking about 3, 4 year olds where we beat the shit out of each other. Um, so I don't necessarily know if I had like an origin story. And I mean, I grew up a huge DBZ fan and a fan of Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's also why I really have I love Muay Thai, even though he's like a Taekwondo guy. But Bloodsport, a very crucial movie, even though it doesn't hold up to this day. But yeah,
Did you play any other sports growing up?
football. I played football for a good minute, but honestly, one coach just kind of ruined it for me. He took out all the fun. Eventually, my senior year, I guess I was in talks with like me getting like a lot of scholarships based on how I did that year. But I walked away from all of that to wrestle. My wrestling year, they did great. But I was just plagued with injuries at the end of the season where it didn't translate into anything, and my style of wrestling just doesn't translate to MMA. Sadly, like my number one go to was the low single to the Iranian, and I would just pin people right off like how quickly I was with the transition. I at one point I was holding like 7 seconds a pin, like that was my average match time. But sadly, it just never translated it into MMA. Like I didn't do blast doubles. I occasionally throw people, even though that would usually just bite me in the ass later in the seasons. But yeah, that was about it.
Did you start doing jujitsu before or after your high school wrestling career?
I started trying it out during my senior year, and then after the season was over, I immediately joined MMA. And that's when I started doing jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and all that fun stuff.
Interesting. Do you think that if you wouldn't have had that bad football coach, that you maybe would have pursued that, given that you had scholarship opportunities and things like that on the football field, rather than maybe taking the wrestling route and then subsequently into MMA?
Maybe. I definitely knew I wanted to wrestle. So my freshman year, I played football. I went to wrestling, but I broke my hand like literally at the start of season, so that didn't work out. Then my sophomore year, that's when I quit football because that coach was just it was a new coach and he's just a dick. But then I ran into the parole or this high school officer. I was running late, like really late one morning. and he pulls me over. I'm like, he was like, hey, you're big. I'm like, yeah, I am, obviously. I was like 6'1". Uh, he was like, do you want to wrestle? I'm like, yeah. My season starts in like 3 months. Oh, we're having preseason. You could come in the room, start trying out. I'm like, yeah. He gives me all this information for wrestling, and then I show up like a day or two later for the match, and then the rest is history. I fell in love with wrestling. That was like, I'm like, this is what I wanted. So I knew it was always going to be on the table, but I didn't know it was going to replace football so quickly too. Like I would still play with my friends, but then I'm like, dude, I like this one-on-one. I hate relying on others. Like even now, I do not play games that require teams. I fucking hate relying on other people. I play slowly single player games just because I hate working with teams.
Why do you think that might be? Why do you think it is? Is it just that you want to rely on yourself and, have all of that be on you and your preparation? Or why do you think it is that you prefer the individual sport rather than the team sport?
There's a few things. One is like, and I will say this would change depending on like my year or location. Like high school, everyone was just doing it for either popularity. People did do it for fun. They had plethora of reasons of doing it. Now you go into college, those reasons narrow down. They're like, I'm playing football because I want to get in the NFL. I'm playing football because of scholarship. I'm playing football to get out of my towns. Like the reasons shrink down. Now you get into the NFL. Why are you playing? Money. I'm doing it for the love of the game. Da da da. Da. And I think I I was already at those. I wanted to achieve something greater than most people want to achieve in high school. Like, oh, people are like, oh, I'm just trying to stay active. I was like, no, I want to achieve greatness. And I couldn't wait until everyone caught up to my level. And instead of like waiting to get to a level where everyone was at my level, I think I went to a different route. And that's why I went to individual sports.
So that's fascinating to me, talking about that you've always wanted to achieve greatness. Early on it seemed like it maybe wasn't going to be the MMA route, but you find yourself in the UFC. When you finally signed on that dotted line to enter the UFC, was it kind of like a lifelong achievement in some sort of way, or was it just another day? Was it just kind of another part of the journey for you?
That was a weird one. I thought it would have more. Like I thought it would be more for me that day. It kind of felt like more like another day. I'm like, it was one of those moments. Is like, it wasn't like, oh my god, I'm here. It's like, fucking finally, you're here. Like you belong here. The bigger one that hit me the hardest was actually when me and Tafa had the fight night bonus. Because up to that point, and one thing that a lot of people don't understand is the regional shows, they pay us decent, but they don't have $1 million backers, $1 billion backers. So you guys can't pay us a substantial living wage like the UFC, PFL, and all them can. For me, it was the first time I've ever made that much money in kind of a day. Um, Before my UFC career, I only made 20 to 30,000, and that's working 3 jobs. I bounced, I was bagging groceries, and I was coaching, plus I was training full time. And I also live in California. Like the odds of like money was stacked against me. And then once I got in the UFC, where I'm like, I'm finally not actually broke for once, truly like changed. And luckily things were kind of moving in the right direction for me. Like I just opened a business and stuff like that, but it was that moment that hit me a lot harder than when I joined the UFC. And that's I think where for me that was like my big I'm here moment.
You have faced so many high level names, legendary names, world champions. Who would you say is the toughest guy you ever faced opposite in your entire career?
It will change day to day on the thoughts because there'll be days where I'm like, this person was the hardest fight. And then when I look back or rewatch the fight, I'm like, all I had to do was this one thing. This one thing and would have literally changed it. And some people don't like to hear that answer. Like, I actually like this gentleman. I'm glad he's doing well. Speed back. I was less than an inch away from knocking him out. When we're talking inches, we're talking inches. There's a photo of me throwing a head kick, and my shin bone just scraped by the top of his dome. Like my calf hit him in the head. My shin bone was just an inch too high. And if that shin bone landed on his head, who knows? I know how hard I was throwing, so I like to believe that might have knocked him out or laid him flat enough to get me a TKO or something. But at the same time, that motherfucker held me down in for the first round to the point where I couldn't move. Like he was really strong there. And yeah, and it was one of those things like, is he the toughest fight? Then I remember getting thrown around by Romanov. I'm just like, now with, and then Olenek, I would be like, I was winning that fight until I wasn't, like, but I would actually say out of all those names I named, the toughest one I think would have been Chase because we beat the shit out of each other. And like I actually got notified at late of that year saying like we had like one of the highest volume thrown from like heavyweights and like all time that year. Like we were like the top 10, like highest volume or how highest output or something like that. And I'm like, so we were trying to kill each other. Uh and physically that one it might have been the hardest. Fucking, I looked like Kim Kardashian after that too. My face swelled up like a goddamn balloon. My lips were out to here. Like I already had big lips, but my fucking lips, like I was the picture perfect duck face kind of person.
What was it like getting the win over a guy like Justin Tafa?
Like it's a win. Like it feels the same.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't like. I am such a pessimist that I don't believe judges. Like I was like when it ended, I was I lost this fight. I was it's like this is a bad performance. Like I was down. Like if you look at my face, I wasn't like, yeah, I won this. I'm like, damn, I lost. Like this sucks. And for me to like win fight of the night, like I was just like, no one cared for that fight. Everyone thought it was boring. And then everyone was like, dude, that fight was amazing. I'm like, oh, okay. I like when I say I'm the biggest critic of myself, I really am. I'm like, I missed that kick. People saw it. They're like, yeah, biggest critic. And I genuinely didn't think I won that fight uh going into the judges because I've been screwed royally by the judges a few fights. So I just figured, this nothing new is going to happen.
Do you think that being your own biggest critic is the reason for a lot of your success? Is that you are hard on yourself?
Oh yeah. the times where like people, okay, so I've had a lot of people try to say, oh, you need to be more positive, more positive. That's a lot of bullshit. Anytime I'm positive, I find myself losing. The fear for me, fear is definitely a motivator. Like, okay, I'll use Eric. Like, motherfucker, big. All right. So I use that to motivate me to do more. Like I use fear more or less to motivate me to keep going because like if I look at Eric and I'm just like, okay, like if I look at all the things that I have going for me, I might not train as hard. Like I'm the champ, not him. I'm younger, not him. You know, like little things like that. I know some people that have to be like, oh, I have all this going for me. I have to be like, okay, well, Muff taller than me. He looks like he never skipped arm day. Might have skipped leg day though. So that is my hard talking. Is me saying he might have skipped leg day. Uh, but no, like I've seen him. He looks big as and so if I went with all the positive things, I don't know if I would push myself that hard. When I go, he's bigger than you. He most likely stronger than you. Now I'm like, I gotta work harder. Like, oh, and then also there's other things that I look at. Like, you guys are at an altitude in Salt Lake. You're 4,000, where I'm only 1,000. I am though very comfortable fighting at altitude. I've actually fought more times I think at altitude of like 4 or 5,000 feet. So I know how to prepare for fights like this. Um, Weirdly enough, one of my game plans going into this is to weaponize cardio. Yeah, I said it. Coming from fucking basically sea level is to weaponize my cardio going into 4,000 feet because as you said, you're from Southern California. I live in a town called Hemet. Our elevation here is like 12 to 13,000. But literally the next city over to me, their elevation is 6.3 thousand, a little higher than Salt Lake. Uh, so I've been doing going up there and doing a little workouts there to kind of get used to you know the drop in oxygen. So I do plan on trying to weaponize my cardio for this fight.
Well, there is